The author, Michael Clarity, is going to be on the show, and just after this little segment where we're going to show him at the festival signing books and people buying the book. So we're going to take a look at that, and we'll meet the author right after this.
How do you think? On the Malden pages.
All right.
Yep.
Very much.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. Thank you very much.
Well,
good luck.
Thank you very much. Free man was, if he wasn't working, they could take him from slavery. So he came north. He was a barber, and it was difficult for him to be a witness when he heard about the killer. And this is part of the fiction. And so the whole book is really from his perspective. So whether he should come forward or not, because there's a risk and there's jump.
And do you live here in Malden?
Yes, I've lived here for a very long time. Yes.
When you hear about the story, what do you think?
It's interesting that it's just across the street. You know, it happened. This is the scene of the crime.
Yeah.
So pretty interesting. Yeah. I'm excited. Thank you for sharing your story.
Oh, you're welcome.
What do you think about the story?
It's pretty good. It's a good story.
And have you read the book yet, or just
I just started a little bit, so I'm only a little into it, but it's going to be a good story. I know the author.
Were you familiar with the story before he brought it to
Oh, yeah, because I read the plaque on the front of the bank, you know, the faces, so really good.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ron.
Okay, we're back, and that was just a taste of Michael at his little table sharing the book, and I hear he had made a good killing on that book, so let's meet him now. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to meet the author, Michael Clarity from Abel Bodied. How you doing?
Doing good. Thanks, Ron, for having me.
Great. Thanks for coming on the show.
It's great. I want to thank yourself, of course. Kevin was just here, the mayor of Malden, the whole staff, the people of Malden. I want to thank Idle Hands, who hosted me at the wonderful, we had a book signing with actors playing roles from the book, and I just want to thank them for their generosity. And also, it was their 5th anniversary yesterday.
Oh, that's fantastic. And they've been one of the new places that's now here 5 years, and it's fantastic. So take their chance of coming to Malden. So let's talk about the book. Here it is. Let's take a look at it. I got the book right here. Oh, we got that. We could just show it up there.
Oh, cool.
That's good enough.
Very good.
The title. Let's first talk about the title.
All right. So it is the first bank robbery murder, and so Cain and Abel is what I was thinking of when it came up with Abel Bodied.
I get it. Okay. So let's talk about the story itself, which when someone asked me, you know, where do you think the first murder in a bank robbery was, you think Tombstone or Chicago or somewhere out west. Yeah, but no.
If you look at Wikipedia, you go through all the Dillingers, the Bonnie and Clydes, Jesse James, there's one little line about the Malden postmaster.
That's it.
So I have a few more I wrote in the
book. Well, I guess you do. How many pages?
It's 334 pages.
Oh, I can't wait to read it. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance. Just got back from vacation, so probably should have taken the book.
I had someone request to meet me, and she took it on vacation to Cabo and read it on the beach.
Oh, that's great. So in terms of the story, and it is a great story because people realize, well, wait a minute, how did this happen, number one? Number two, what happened to the guy that did it?
Yeah, well, that's the second
and
book.
Who he shot.
Well, Frank
probably even more important.
Well, Elijah Converse, of course, is the first mayor. That happened in 1881 when the town turned into a city. But in 1863, he was just a very rich businessman with the Boston Rubber Shoe Company and also president of the Malden Bank. And his son, Frank, was 17, and he was going to show him the ropes of the company. And I did fictionalize, you know, the dialogue and the internal thoughts. But basically, he was the firstborn son, and he was going to be groomed in the father's business practices.
So was he the only one in the bank at the time?
He was the only one in the bank at the time. There was only one other employee, who was Mr. Merrow, who was the cashier, who was taking him under his wing. And at the time, which is kind of interesting, a lot of people wouldn't know, there was no federal currency. So the bank printed their own Malden Bank currency.
Really?
And every bank did that at that time, I think until 1870 or a little bit later. I don't know the exact year. But what the cashier would do, or Frank would also do, they'd take turns once a week taking the train into Boston to the Exchange Bank just to kind of get the notes all straightened out. And so the postmaster across the street, which is where Hugh O'Neill's is, which is just fascinating. I was doing the book signings directly. I would write, not in your book, although I may have written in your book, from the scene of the crime, because or steps from the scene. You're a little bit further away here, so I added the steps. But it's basically, Kevin was wonderful placing me on the corner of Dartmouth and Pleasant Street with Hugh O'Neill's right there. In the corner of Hugh O'Neill's is where the post office was. The buildings were a little bit different. There's 3 little gabled buildings that were there. And there's a photo, which it's on my website. I think I did send you the photo, too, of the street with just a dirt road with horse and buggies.
Well, we do have some photos. Let's see photo number 2.
That's what Pleasant Street looks like. That was taken a little bit later, so I think that was taken in 1867, but it still gives you the same idea of what the street looked like.
And what's the date of the murder?
The date of the murder is December 15th, 1863.
So it was during Civil War.
Civil War, and so you look on where the buggy is on the right. Right of that would be where the bank is. It's mostly obscured. It was a smaller structure than the current structure that's there now where Faces is. And then you can see the 3 little gabled houses kind of on the corner across the street. One of them is the post office where Hugh O'Neill's currently is. So we basically walked across the street. And you can see it's pretty deserted at the time of day. I mean, that was taken, again, a few years later. Right. But there was no Malden police force at the time. The cops had to come from Boston. And Boston had only had a police force since 1854, I believe 1854. And they had 5 detectives. So there are 2 detectives that are part of the story at one point were based on real people.
And in terms of, and this is another part of the story that I think is great, you know, how they caught the guy and what that happened. But before we get to that part, there is another photo, I think, of the son. What's the next photo? We could see that?
Oh, that's the murderer.
Oh, that's the murderer.
That's Edward Green. That's taken from a newspaper. And he basically, it's in the novel as well, he went to get his picture taken in Boston. So that's a sketch of his photo. But he went to Boston to take his picture, and that's in the novel. And then they later on, well, I don't want to give away too much, but that is a real description of what Edward Green looked like.
Well, here's the other thing. And what's the next picture? I think it might be the Converse's son. What's the next picture? Is there? We have one more picture? No? Oh, I thought we did. Nope. All right.
Well, if you want to see Converse's son, you go to the beautiful library, and the painting is there. And I'd like to thank also Doris St. Martin from the Malden Library, who's been very helpful. And Frank's photo is side by side with his 2 parents who dedicated the library to their slain son.
And let's talk about that because you know, we have this great gem of an architecture as well as a great library right here in this community, and it's probably there for a reason. It has to do with the mayor giving back.
The mayor gave back. He was quite a philanthropist. Of course, the old YMCA, the Malden Hospital, the Soldiers' Home, which is in Chelsea, Pine Banks, and then interestingly enough, too, which I'm sure you know, that the reservoir, the Fellsmere Reservoir, was his factory at one point, which is kind of after the events in the book. But the factory, there was a fire, so he, with the architect Frederick Olmsted, designed our little gem that is along the Fellsway there, and it was to have water source so you could put out a fire. But he left it for the city.
Isn't that great? Oh, my God. And the hospital is right there, too.
Yes.
Probably, if that ever got on fire, it just died on its own.
Oh, that's true, unfortunately.
But again, in terms of your writing, so let's talk about that, how you got into
writing. It took 8 years to write this book.
Wow.
And during I started December of 2012. And so the murder, of course, is December 15th, 1863. So my initial plan was to have it written in the 150th anniversary, and here we are now, and it's far past that.
Well, it's a story that will always be there. I think it's just so memorable in terms of, you know, you got to read it because we don't give away some stuff, but I think part of how they found the guy is quite a story, and I can't wait to read this because it's a novel because you've added dialogue.
And there are some people. I mean, it's historical fiction. It started off. I did all the journalism, so I went through. I don't want to say hundreds of newspapers, but a lot of the things were the same exact article. And then on the 5th or 6th one, there would be a little nugget of information that wasn't in the other ones. Wow. So it's just like panning for gold. And sometimes they're contradicting facts of others. So I had to kind of take some kind of
literary license.
That's what I'd call it, Ron. That besides my driver's license, that's the only one I have.
There you go. No, it's a great story, and I can't wait to read the book. In terms of your next step, is there going to be anything else?
Well, the book, of course, what happened, the only way I could finish it is when I started writing it, 2 years in, I had 900 pages. So that was too much, and it was hard to kind of go through. So I went to like a middle point, and luckily it was a point where the story could continue. So the second book will be out in the spring.
That's great.
Yeah,
and
it's more.
Do you have a name?
I don't have the main. It'll probably still have the subtitle of The Murder at the Malden Bank, but the Abel Bodied will be replaced. I have a name, but I don't want to tentative name. I don't want to give it away at this point.
Yeah, you never know because the audience watching this show is so big. So, in terms of where do you see this, how do people get this book?
Well, the Malden Festivals, and again, thanks to Kevin Duffy and the City of Malden and everyone else in giving me that spot, has been tremendous. And then the pub crawl was wonderful, and people...
Talk a little bit about that, because I missed it. That was
Saturday night. So basically, Idle Hands gave me a nice table in the corner, and some of my videos and images, they put on a huge projector screen behind me. And they had actors who were in the pub and all the other pubs. I didn't see, I stayed there, so I didn't see the other locations, which were, the other locations were from...
Well, I think they walked by the First National Bank.
Yeah, well, they went in there. So they started Idle Hands, and then they went to All Seasons Table, which is where the witness, the barber with the barber shop, was basically All Seasons Table.
Wow.
So it's very pertinent. And Idle Hands is very close, you know, within walking distance of the Boston Rubber Shoe Company.
That's right.
So that's the furthest proximity. The other ones are all actual sites of things in real life and in my novel. So William Shiloh's barbershop, who's kind of my main character, he didn't end up being my. In the beginning, would be the murderer and the victim, and of course the parents, the grieving parents, which were all in there. But it really kind of shifted. William Shiloh's story, which I had very limited knowledge of, kind of took over a good chunk of the book as the witness. And so I gave away, it kind of tell you who the murderer is, and it's on the plaque, like you said. So the premise of the story is really a reluctant witness who's a free man who's born in Delaware.
Yeah. He
comes up, and he's new in town. He has his family, and I do have fictional interactions with the postmaster. So it's really his journey for his own protection, and also what's just for the Converse family.
And then there's another kind of a story. I don't know if it's in the book or maybe it's in part 2. Is what happens to the guy who gets captured and charged.
That's
a whole other story.
That's in this book.
Oh, it is.
It is in this book yet. I don't want to say exactly where it ends, but the second book too. The wife of Everett Green is fascinating. There was a bit. He was not just a murderer. He was also very deceptive. He had other issues, which I kind of fictionalized a bit, but he had heavy debt, which is why Frank was in the bank alone, kind of new to the job, trusting. They were close in all the newspaper.
So do you think it was a crime of, what's the word, of opportunity?
Opportunity,
or
opportunity. Well, it's difficult because I get in his head.
Yeah,
so,
well, that's what writers do, right?
So I can't say for 100% certainty, but he did cross the street 3 times.
There we go,
So and it was just finding the right moment. Customers kind of coming and going. The other thing at the time, there was no fingerprints until like 20, 30 years later. And the police weren't there. There was a constable. So mainly it's eyewitnesses and confessions that the police had to deal with back in the day.
And no forensic, like you're saying, just
I mean, look at the witches.
Words of mouth and interviews, and
the witches just pointed fingers at people, pointed fingers at innocent women, and so I'm sure a lot of people ended up in a bad place that were innocent. But Green was guilty, as far as I know. I wasn't there, but I would say he was guilty.
And then what happens to him? That's a whole other story.
Yeah, that's the second book.
Yeah, because that has to do with without giving away the idea of the justice system.
Yeah, that was a new thing too. I mean, you had abolitionism, and you also had some of these same people who were also against the death penalty at that point. The Civil War was just staggering, and that's kind of what the interest of this book was for me. Was tens of thousands of men on both sides in Virginia, Pennsylvania, everywhere else. I mean, Gettysburg is just slaughter, and they have a murder in this little kind of a village. There's 3,000 people in Malden. They didn't even know when one character comes across Frank, who's been shot. They thought he just bumped his head. They never saw a gunshot wound before. It wasn't until the doctor arrived. And the doctor has a great name. It's Dr. Burpee, which my wife loved, Dr. Burpee. And his office is pretty much where, next to Hugh O'Neill's, my barber, Estefan's barbershop, is pretty much where Dr. Burpee was.
Well, as a matter of fact, I think Burpee's a big name in Malden.
Oh, is it really? Okay.
I know a Jane Burpee.
Could be a descendant.
It could be.
Yeah. A lot of names go back quite a bit here.
Incredible. Well, we're winding down here, but I did want to talk a little bit about as a writer. Is this something that you were driven to take on? Or
it was,
what made you become a writer?
And the duration. I tried to write a book in my 20s, which is mostly done, and maybe I'll revisit that if I can. It has a Malden tie as well. It was kind of set in the 1880s. I hadn't really thought of going back to the 1860s, but the Civil War is fascinating to a lot of people, and to me. And in Malden's part, there was. So basically, when I wrote the book, I wouldn't give advice how to write a book, but perseverance. I just kept at it, and I didn't really. I knew I'd finish it, and it's been great. I mean, it's happened that the COVID's ended and we've opened up, and then the festivals and just people wanting to be out is really just been a good timing for me.
Now, what's your style of writing? Is it you set aside a day, some moments, years?
It was I mean, it was just every day for.
Yeah.
There was little breaks, I think, sometimes, Ron. But I'd wake up at 2 in the morning and grab my phone and write notes. I'd have ideas or thoughts, and again, I called them tent poles. I had basically the story points of Elijah basically building this town. Edgeworth was basically owned and bought and brought in for his workers to work in his factory.
Yeah.
And I do mention a lot of streets. I think a lot of Malden people are like that. So Maplewood's in there. Of course, Malden Square, Pleasant Street. There's Ferry Street. I dropped certain streets that were accurate and just kind of sprinkled some other ones in just for scenery of Malden.
Well, if you're a Malden resident, and even if you're not, this is a great story, and I can't tell you enough what a great story this is, and to read it and really look back and hear this great story of really two people that met and would change some things.
And they were described as very close friends, like brothers. So that was another reason the Cain and Abel thing kind of came up.
Okay,
there's a 10-year age difference.
Now I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
and there's another reason too, but you have to read the book for.
I have to read the book. All right. We want to give it out.
I want to give it away.
All right, Kevin. Thank you so much. I mean, Michael.
That's fine.
Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ron.
By.
Pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Clardy. Let's hear it.